President, CEO, and founder of the Space Force Association. Colonel, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming.
Hey, Bruce, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate you doing this. It's great to get the word out about what the Space Force Association is doing, and so it's great on a monthly basis to catch up with you and just share with folks about what's happening around the organization.
Yeah, there are some great things happening too. I got a whole list of stuff I want to go through, but I know that we've had some personnel, exciting things happen with personnel. We're growing, we're expanding. I thought maybe you want to take a minute and talk about that.
When I started SFA back in 2019, I didn't know how it would just attract some extremely talented people. I didn't know the level of folks that would surround this organization and this mission. You included, by the way, but a tremendous group of volunteers joined SFA and started to really identify with the mission and vision of the organization. And so we've got our new chairman of the board of directors is Matt Domo. And for those of you who don't know who Matt Domo is, I'd recommend do just a little bit of research because he co-founded AWS and he's worked with Amazon for a long time, and he's worked with Microsoft before that. And so he refers to, when he says Jeff and Bill, who he's referring to is Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. And so he worked directly with both of those individuals and helped grow both of those organizations tremendously. So when he came to us and I started talking to him about what we were doing here at the Space Force Association, he was really intrigued, and he goes, "Hey, I really like this mission and the vision you have for the organization, so I want to help." And in talking with him, I said, "Hey, would you be willing to serve on the board of directors?" And he goes, "You bet." And then as we continue the dialogue, he says, "Hey, I really think I can help here and organizational structure and setup." And I said, "Well, Matt, I don't know anyone else who's built several multi-billion-dollar companies, so we're honored to have you at SFA." So we held elections just a couple weeks ago, and the board elected Matt to chair the SFA board of directors. And I did an interview with him, albeit a rudimentary interview last year. So if folks want to go back and listen to that, you sure can. It's a podcast interview that I did, and you can go to our YouTube channel and watch that. But recommend we get an interview with him in the near future, Bruce, because he's just a tremendous asset. And now what he's doing, in his real job, what he does is he founded an AI company. And so he is what I would call a national treasure in artificial intelligence, extremely versed in it, knows exactly what's going on. So just a great asset to have in the organization. Really honored to have him there. But it's not just about folks coming to the organization and joining. It's also about the tremendous, valuable folks that we've had on the team that are retiring. And so for many of you, Rhonda Shea, she actually started this radio show, helped us start this radio show and gave us the connections to allow this radio show to happen. So really appreciate her leadership. But the radio show is just a small part of everything she's done. She was one of our first employees at SFA. And, when I was going through kind of looking at what we need to do to get this thing going, I said, hey, we really just need to get the word out or help get the word out about what the organization is. And she's perfect at that because she's got a background in public affairs, and she's sales, and she's led teams of 20, 30 folks. She worked for Disney. And so she, like many folks, they reach out via social media, LinkedIn mostly, and they say, hey, I want to help. And so Rhonda reached out 3.5 years ago, and she goes, hey, I like what you're doing, and I'm kind of semi-retired, but I sure would like to help you out. So she joined the team then, and I think our social media at the time that she joined, I think we maybe had 1,000 followers or so. And after she joined, very quickly, we rose to 30,000 plus followers that we've got today. So I attribute a lot of that to what she's done for the organization to help get the word out. She's been our quote-unquote den mother at SFA for many years, and the entire staff refers to her as such. And then she helped us stand up Space Power Conference and sold many of the sponsorships there and got really Space Power Conference off the ground. So I attribute a lot of that success to her passion for the mission. And anyone who talks to her just, they just overcome with enthusiasm because she exudes so much of it, so it's just been a real treat having her on the team. And she's going to stay with us. She's like, hey, I can't work full time like I've been doing, but I can definitely volunteer. So she's not going too far away from the organization. She's just stepping out of her role as general manager into a volunteer capacity. So really honored to have worked with Rhonda and will continue to work with her. So that's kind of what's going on with the staff, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the chapters. So much going on with chapters. One of the things that when I talk to General Saltzman, what he asks on a regular basis is, how many chapters do you have? And where are they at? Because one of the problems, and we've talked about this before, is there aren't a lot of Space Force bases. And so how do we get the message out to just different communities about what the Space Force is and what the Space Force is doing? And he asked that question deliberately to find out, hey, how are you engaging with the different local communities? So the chapters is the way to do it. And so he actually, probably because he supports chapter efforts so much, he supported a recent event down in Huntsville. So a big shout out to the Huntsville interim president, Damon Feltman, for putting that event together to do the premiere of the new video that came out from the Space Force to help educate folks about what that is. So that is made for planetariums, always above. And so they did that at the planetarium there in Huntsville. Great event. It was the premiere. General Saltzman showed up, did a fireside chat with Damon Feltman. And so really excited about what the chapters are doing.
Yeah, that is exciting. And speaking of chapters, I know we've got stuff going on in Vandenberg, but interesting things happening up in Boston. That's a new chapter that's just getting going.
Yeah, here's an example of really what this organization's all about. You know, you want to get involved, you want to learn about the Space Force, you can't join the Space Force, you can join SFA, I say that all the time. But here's an example of a Space Force guardian who took it amongst himself to create a chapter because he saw the potential for SFA. And he's like, hey, I want to get involved not just in what I'm doing in the Space Force, but I want to help outside the Space Force as well. So he volunteered to start a chapter in Boston. And so if you've not had the chance, go to LinkedIn, type in SFA New England Boston, and take a look at an event that they're doing here in just a couple days. On June 11th, they're going to be hosting Lieutenant General Phil Grant, who is a commander of Space Systems Command. He's going to do an all-call with Guardians in the location beforehand, and then he's going to open it up to the local community there for folks to just learn more about what the Space Force is doing and what some of his priorities are. You know, in Space Systems Command, for those who don't know, that is the lead field command for all acquisitions for the U.S. Space Force. So any new program we buy, any new capability that the Space Force buys, it goes through Space. So they've got a saying outside SSC there in Los Angeles that says space starts here, and that's true. That's exactly where it starts, is with the acquirers, and they do phenomenal work to get us the programs we need, the Space Force needs, we the nation, but the Space Force needs to ensure freedom of action in the space domain.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. There's so much that's going on. You know, I kind of follow your travels, which are far and wide, and you're a man on the move. And you've recently been in Washington, D.C., and you've been visiting members of Congress up there, Space Force leaders. I'm just curious what those conversations, obviously they're about the Space Force, but what's going on up in Washington, D.C. as it regards to the Space Force?
Yeah, it's exciting. Our lawmakers are getting it, that we need to ensure the Space Force has the resources it needs to accomplish its congressionally mandated mission of ensuring freedom of action in the space domain while denying our adversaries the ability to do the same. And so it's always good to get to the Hill and talk to those lawmakers about how we can ensure the resources are going to the Space Force. So what we did for this trip is we went up to just engage with members of the Space Force Caucus, which, by the way, for folks who want to help inform members of Congress about what the Space Force needs and help be an advocate and a champion for the Space Force, go check out the spaceforcecaucus.org website. And if your representative is not a part of that, I'd recommend that you reach out to your representative, your local representative, and say, hey, you should join the Space Force Caucus to ensure the Space Force is getting the resources it needs. But what the Space Force Caucus did, really excited about this, is we drafted language to be passed into law known as the Legacy Guardian Act. and this is one of the SFA members who is steeped in knowing and knowledge and knowing about how Congress works. So one of our members drafted that language and we pushed it forward. We had an event. Our legislative committee chair, Katie Spencer, had an event called Orbit the Hill last year where members of SFA went to different members of Congress to ensure this law could get passed. And what this law does, now that it's passed, it allows people like me who grew up in Air Force Space Command as a space operator and space professional to be recognized as a legacy guardian. And, it might be trivial, but now what I can do is I can get a license plate that says Space Force veteran. And what this does is it allows thousands of members like me to be recognized as veteran because a lot of the support comes from our veteran corps. But as we know, it takes a long time to produce veterans. And so the Space Force needs all the help it can get right now to gain traction and gain support. And so the Legacy Guardian Act was passed, and we're working with the Space Force leaders to create this program. But the way we see it unfolding is you log into a website, you submit your DEEN, which is your military service record, and then we compile that list and we send it over to the Space Force for review, and then they acknowledge that yes, these people are recognized as legacy guardians. And then again, another volunteer, Mark Dreiling, created this patch for us. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it.
Oh yeah,
this is going to be the Legacy Guardian lapel pin that is going to go with the recognition. So the device.
What's the significance of the dates on it?
Well, so this is from when space started, 1882, to just when the Space Force stood up, 2019. And so, yeah, if you reach out to Mark Dreiling, he'll tell you about the entire significance of this. And so when the lapel, by the way, we had one of these flown in space on a Blue Origin mission. And so that'll be presented to the Space Force very soon, in probably the end of the month. So when folks get this device, it's going to be a lapel pin. I'm going to call it the Dreiling. And so I'm going to make sure you have the Dreiling on your jacket or on your suit whenever you're wearing it, so that folks know you are in fact a Legacy Guardian. So really excited about that.
That's like, that would be thousands of people, right? I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yes. We think the estimate is probably 2,000, but I believe the real numbers are closer to 7,000 or 8,000. But yeah, what we're going to do is increase that veteran pool so that folks can be recognized as veterans of the Space Force. So it's very exciting.
Because they're really the ones that were the foundation of the Space Force, essentially.
Yeah, that's exactly true. When you start talking about where the Space Force evolved from, while yes, it was birthed out of the Air Force, and just like the Air Force was birthed out of the Army, it is now an independent service responsible for a very critical mission with, again, the lowest number of members in any service at about 9,000 uniform members and another 7,000 civilians. That is the smallest service that we've got, and quite honestly, we need to increase it. So the Veteran Corps that we're helping to create is going to help increase at least the knowledge, to help get the knowledge out about what the Space Force is.
Yeah, exciting stuff. Let me ask you a little bit deeper question. Since we're in Washington, D.C., and that's the home of all policy, things that are happening, there's been a lot of discussion around budgets. It's the time of year for that. And a lot with, on the DoD side, the military side, talking about cost efficiencies, which I think intuitively everyone thinks there could probably be some cost savings, in different areas across the military, but also talking about spending increases in areas. And I'm just curious, haven't been up there on the Hill recently, but what does all that mean for the Space Force?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that Space Force leaders are obviously engaged with the Senate and the House on, to ensure that they're getting the resources they need. The way I'm thinking about it, and these are the discussions I've been having with our policymakers, is, as technology increases, and it should be an inverse curve. As technology increases, requirements should decrease. In other words, we should ask what efficiencies technology has allowed us to gain, and then based on those efficiencies, we should determine what capabilities we don't need anymore. In other words, technologically, let's continue to advance. And from a resource perspective, let's think about where we can cut. I suspect that's exactly what they're doing today, is they're looking at, hey, what technologies are antiquated that we don't need to continue to support? And then what are the technologies that we've gained such that it covers down on those antiquated technologies? That's the hope, is, we're thinking about this deliberately, but unfortunately, excuse me, it seems like as technologies have increased, so have resource requirements.
Yeah.
And so we just got to think about this, and this is what this administration is thinking about is, how do we gain efficiencies, because we as taxpayers want to make sure that we're not paying for technologies that we don't need anymore. And so those are the discussions that are going on the Hill today, is how do we gain efficiencies based on technological advancements. But one thing's for sure, we need more leadership in the Space Force. In other words, whenever you grow 2 4-star generals, which the Space Force has 3 4-star generals right now, we've got the Chief of Space Operations, the Vice Chief of Space Operations, and right now you've got the U.S. Space Command Commander, General Whiting, as a 4-star. The question is, how do you grow those? What's the bench to grow those positions? And with currently, I think there's 21 general officer billets in the Space Force. The reality is we need 32 plus general officer billets in the Space Force, and that is constant. There's never not going to be a need to have discussions about what's going on in the service.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. Thanks for sharing that with us. I want to move on to a couple things, some programmatic stuff that's going on in the Space Force Association. There's always changing. It's always moving. Every time I talk with you, I learn new stuff that I thought I knew before, but it's changed. So I know there are exciting things happening at the Space Professional Society, and you also, you and I talked about the Space Research Fellowship. I'd love to get some details on the Space Professional Society.
Hey, let me talk on the Space Research Fellowship first, and then I'll come back to the Space Professional Society, because I think, one is executing and one is in development. So the Space Research Fellows and that fellowship, here's another example of a volunteer in the organization, a guardian volunteer in the organization saying, hey, I think there's an opportunity here to collaborate with FFRDCs on capabilities that we should be talking about. So we hosted the Space Research Fellows at the Space Power Conference last year. This is organic growth within the organization that I really wasn't tracking much of. And this is, again, our volunteer education committee lead, Dr. Mike Lutz Martindale, who helped start this thing. And then at Space Power, he's displaying the results, and the Guardians are displaying their results of this research program that they went through. And then Matt, as I talked about earlier, he looked at one of these and he goes, are you seeing what they're talking about over there? Because they're talking about some really cool things. And I said, Matt, to tell you the truth, I wasn't tracking. But for those who aren't tracking, I'd recommend that you go to our website, ussfa.org, and look at Space Research Fellows. And what it is about initiating space research programs to connect young professionals with research institutions. And what it does is it pairs bright young space professionals with top researchers in federally funded research and development centers, think tanks, and universities to pursue research topics relevant to the Space Force and its individual mission areas. It's really the first of its kind, and it's structured to inspire and challenge young leaders to expand their thinking and challenge established operational and tactical constructs, propose innovative approaches, and stretch the envelope of Space Force thinking on how to gain and maintain space superiority. Very excited about this program. This is our second year in existence. Again, we're going to highlight I understand there's some leadership changes happening within the program, and how this is with an organization like this. If you have a single volunteer who's starting this thing and you don't have a backup for that volunteer, then all of a sudden we lose the opportunity for consistency. And so here's a program that a young guardian started, and we'd like to see it continue, but we're looking for supporters to sponsor it. And so if your company is interested in the Space Research Fellows, I'd recommend that you reach out to me, and we'll put you in contact with our sales team, Kelsey Parker, who will ensure that this program continues to evolve with your support. So that's the Space Research Fellows, which leads me right into the Space Professional Society. And what's really exciting about this, another example, Sophia Skiba, she goes by Skiba. She's a student I met a few years ago in, it was, I think, 2023. And I gave this talk at ASU, and there was a student club that said, hey, if you're giving a talk here at ASU, can you come in, or we're having a meeting, can you come in and talk to the students? When I talked to the students, Skiba was one of them, and she goes, this is exactly the organization I've been looking for. She showed up at Space Power. She asked her mom for a Christmas gift, which was showing up to Space Power. She sat center stage at Space Power 23, got motivated, and said, hey, I want to start something within SFA. So we created the Space Professional Society, which is a student-led organization to bring university students together who want to start their space careers. You know, right now, in fact, when I started my space career several years ago, let's just say 25 plus years ago, there wasn't an on-ramp. You know, and typically what folks did is they went through some engineering specialty and then started a space career accidentally. And then they thought only about NASA, but they weren't thinking necessarily militarily. So what this does is it allows folks who want to start their space careers, regardless of the sector they're joining, because we know a majority of folks are going to join the commercial sector, but if they want to join the civil or join the Space Force, they can. And so Space Professional Society aims at on-ramping students to create the workforce of the future that we know we're going to need. And so honored to announce Dr. Melissa Patton, who is the program manager for that program, and she's a volunteer here at SFA, and she's been reaching out to folks to gain support. But that organization will have a 100 through 400 level opportunity. You know, the young students are learning from the older students are mentoring the younger students, the older students are getting mentored by industry, and Space Force Guardians is the intent, and then it culminates in a regional and then national level competition capstone event that Dr. Patton is working on. Again, if you want to learn more about SPS, please go to you, and under programs you'll see Space Professional Society, and if you're interested, again, we're starting this program up, so if you're interested in sponsoring this, and I suspect that most industry folks would want to sponsor something like this because it is their future workforce. They are directly creating the workforce that they need in the future. So really looking for support and sponsorship support from our industry partners on this one as we continue to grow the program.
Yeah, and that's exciting. You know, and talking with Sophia Skiba, she's just a bundle of energy, super excited about everything space, and just those are the kind of students that are involved in this stuff. So it's super exciting. So much going on. Hey, speaking of so much going on, last thing for you, Bill, you do a podcast, a weekly podcast, and I've been checking it out, and it's good. It's great, actually. And you have some interesting people on that. And I thought maybe you could just pick out a couple and tell us about it and where to find your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, I'm trying to set it up such that it's bi-weekly, but I tell you the biggest problem with setting up a podcast, as you know, with doing the radio show, is scheduling. And so I'm working with the team to make sure we get a schedule, and then trying to align my schedule, which again, there's no excuse. You know, this is important to get this information out. So really, we're looking for more folks who want to participate in Space Power Podcast. So if you're interested in participating, just reach out and say, hey, I want to get on Space Power Podcast. And what it does, what the intent of the podcast is to talk about space power and what's going on in that, on that topic. Specifically, recently, it was great during a Space Symposium. It was a lot of fun because I was able to interview Lieutenant General Miller, who is the commander of Space Operations Command. And during the interview, we're talking about advanced training requirements and how he's preparing the force to ensure that they're ready to protect the space domain and defend the space domain, and if necessary, to offensively ensure that we're gaining the ground that we need in the domain. And while we're having that discussion, General Saltzman just happens to walk by, and so General Saltzman, Chief Space Operations, just crashed that podcast. So if you've not had a chance to watch that one, I think that's a pretty entertaining podcast. And of course, we got insights from General Saltzman on what he's thinking about with creating the warfighting culture that he's creating in the service. So that's one. Another one is Jural Shah from Gravitics. Very interesting company, because what they're doing is creating on-orbit capability technology to replace the International Space Station, or at least they're trying to. They're competing with many other companies that are trying to do the same thing, but he talks about how they're doing that. If you want to hear more from Jural Shah, and really from other folks, what we've done at SFA is we've partnered with a company to create the Space Cities event. So if you're not tracking, Space Cities is an event that we're hosting at the Capitol Hill Club on June 20th, where we're talking about the intersection between commercial, NASA, and Space Force. And so we're bringing folks in from all the sectors to have a discussion because this administration, President Trump said in January, we're going to Mars. Well, we just don't go to Mars. We got to talk about how we're getting to Mars. So there's a big infrastructure discussion that we've got to have, and we need a lot of folks having this dialogue. So really excited about that.
I was going to wrap up here, Bill, but I got to ask about that. So we've got people from Space Force, from NASA, and just the civilian, the industry side. And is it going to be like a panel? Is it going to be? I mean, how do you show up? Can I just show up?
Well,
I might just show up.
By the way, yes, it'd be great if everyone could show up. But the fact is, we've got about 100 seats available, and so it is an invite-only discussion. But the intent is to collect around this dialogue so that we can continue to advance it. And right now, there's a lot of pockets that are having discussions about what this means. But if you think about this from an economic standpoint, just look at how cities are being established around access to space. So Starbase is an example. Down in Boca Chica, Texas, just got recognized as a city that the entire city is focused around access to the space domain, which, by the way, if you look back at one of the Star Trek movies, remember when young Captain...
in the industry, it's an anecdotal number I'll give you, but after we were talking about this, we feel roughly 15% of the workforce now has been through this competition that is in the aerospace industry. They're involved in the Blue Origins and the SpaceX's and the Fireflies and Firehawk and all of them. So something that we're really proud of, and it's what our mission is. Honestly, is to be able to mold the clay that the young engineers and have them, be able to reach their dreams by, our process, which goes all the way from preliminary design to critical design to safety reviews to building their payloads and documenting it all and getting an opportunity to launch.
Yeah, it's quite substantial. I noticed on the website you've got a lot of technical documents. I mean, just on orbits, on launching, on all kinds of things for people to use in building their rockets. So that's exciting stuff. It's far more detailed, and I'll be honest and say I've not heard of you guys before, but it doesn't surprise me that there is something like that, because we are such a space kind of focused country in the technology area. It just only makes sense. Now, you mentioned about launching rockets to greater and greater altitudes. I mean, what are we talking? 5,000 feet, 10,000 feet?
Well, we have a number of, part of our competition is for the teams to engineer rockets that reach specific altitudes. So our standards are 10,000 feet, 30,000 feet. This year we added a two-stage category to 45,000. And then we have a demonstration category, which is kind of our first year back with our demonstration category, but that's up to 100,000 feet. So we have a waiver up to 100,000 feet, and we are encouraging the students to be able to take advantage of that. It's one of those things that our competition had been 10,000, 30,000 for a long time. With our move to Midland, we were able to get higher waivers. Our goal was to increase the engineering challenge for the students. This year is the first year we're going to be able to have them flex their wings, if you will.
That's exciting. So Texas, great place to launch rockets. Midland, Texas, obviously kind of in the middle of Texas. So plenty of space out there, I'm guessing. But so before we dive into the competition, which I know is coming up, tell us a little bit more about the association and just
there's the association, and we go, rather than say Experimental Sounding Rocket Association every time, we go by ESRA. So,
Okay.
Yeah, ESRA is the acronym that we use, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have no paid employees. Everything that we do is based on our volunteer base, which has been phenomenal. Our mission, it's pretty simple. We provide students with real-world opportunities to take their engineering talent that they've done book smart, and they've gotten the learning, is to give them the practical skills then to work on a team to build one of these rockets. And we emphasize the organization of that team, which is not just aerospace engineers, although they're about 36% of the engineers, but there's mechanical engineers. It is energizing, to say the least.
I can imagine that. So I'm curious how this process works. So it's not just, hey, we show up in June and we launch a rocket. there's
Right.
a team, there's a process that's involved. It sounds like Ezra is involved in along the way. You mentioned critical design reviews on. So if I'm like, hey, I think I want to launch a rocket,
Mm-hmm.
I go to the Ezra website. But I mean, what's the process for me to
So
get to launch a rocket?
we provide an awful lot of guidance, but the first step, almost for any of the, at least the teams that have the ability to access Tripoli. Tripoli is a rocketry association that handles insurance and that sort of thing, but there's a resource pool inside that organization of guys just like me who have, there's a certification levels that you need to obtain to be able to launch the bigger and more powerful rockets. And I usually advise each one of the school teams to find their local club, to get the mentor from that local club. And then they're involved pretty much right at the beginning of this process. And in fact, we require it as part of their team as they're working through the process of preliminary design, critical design, safety reviews, that sort of thing, that they have a mentor that knows this level of rocketry. So it's go to your local area. If you're an international team, there are international clubs that are out there you can help. There's one thing about the Tripoli organization is it's the research arm of the amateur rocketry. So we allow things like students to fabricate their own propellants, mix their motors, pour their motors, be involved in hybrid motors, so that level of knowledge is really in the base of this organization. And then with our team, we have the engineering team that is on top of that. So we provide engineering resources and we provide rocketry knowledge, and we're ready to go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. You can pour your own solid rocket motor. That's
It's that's the other piece. My background. Take the chemistry background and tweak rocket formulas to be able to maximize the thrust, or if it's the initial punch off the pad, or if it's the long burning. There's different rockets, and you make different propellants based on what you want out of that performance. The teams love it. I mean, because it's not just the fabrication of the rocket, which is awesome in itself, but then to actually be able to develop your own propellant that then you're using to launch your rocket, that's sort of the next level fun,
That is next level fun right there. Now, the Space Force Association, we're partnering with you guys on this. I want you to tell me a little bit about that partnership, and then I want to move to the competition that's upcoming. But tell us about the partnership that we've got together.
So this is the first year, and really it's come together in the last couple of months. And initially, we share a mission. Our mission statement is almost the same in that we're looking to develop that next level of engineer, the next level of aerospace engineer, and build the industry, the aerospace industry in Texas, or nationally, or internationally. So it is a partnership that's just these things are very much alike. And what yours is really at the industry level, ours is university level, and it's really being able to take the industry component and our university component, put it together so we've got a complete picture up and down the stack of the aerospace industry. So that's, and this is the first year, and it's only been within the last few months, but we're sharing contact information, and the SFA is going to be sponsoring a industry event for us at our launch this year. So I think there's good things to come. We're in the infancy of it, and just looking forward to where it takes us.
Yeah, I agree. SFA's excited to partner with Ezra on this. Hey, so speaking of exciting things, June the 10th. So that's the big competition day. So depending on when viewers are watching or listening to this, if that's still out in the future, I encourage you to go check the Ezra website. If not, then you can check the Ezra website anyway for pictures, I'm sure, and you'll know who won. But tell me about that. So I was reading, so over 100 teams, I'm assuming that means like universities, so, and not just national to the U.S., but also international. Several thousand people will attend this.
Yep.
And you've already mentioned the different categories. So there's like 10,000, 30,000, 45,000, and To me, I read that as the unlimited category.
Yeah, the 100,000. Well,
Yeah.
no, there's 100,000 that's in a demonstration class.
Oh, it's
yeah.
100,000. So you did put a limit. So okay. So
Yeah,
there's no-
that's for now. Again, this is a new site, and when you're working with the FAA, you have to demonstrate your capability before we even talk about anything else.
Okay. And no people. We're not launching people. We're just
No vertebrate animals. I mean, that's part of our rule set. No vertebrate animals. So,
You can't
that
take your
includes,
favorite pet.
yeah, that's
into the
right.
world.
No mice or anything like that.
But
we
I
can't
did say
launch
that there, there's
the
a
dogs.
payload there that you launched, though, right?
Yeah, we have a payload requirement. So although we discourage it, it can be just a ballast, a weight, 2.2 pounds no, I'm sorry, 2 kilos. I'm sorry. And then, but we have a payload challenge actually that's part of this. So we partner with Space Dynamics Laboratory, and their company is all about the payload. And so they sponsor this category for us, and it's the most innovative, it's the most practical, it's the most, they go through a first, second, and third place, and the teams will develop these very sophisticated payloads that last year, the winner, and I wish I could remember off the top of my head what its function was, but they said that there's real world application for this. So it's, again, letting the engineers flex their engineering muscle to do good and to take what is a competition, but then they could even think of spinning off the payload section of this as their first company.
Wow.
So
that's exciting. If you're a college student getting ready to graduate, you've mixed your own solid propellant brew, and now you've got a payload, and gosh, maybe you could start a company. So I got to ask you this question. So, there are winners of these categories.
Yes.
And I'm assuming you don't win based on how cool your rocket looks. It's more.
Yeah.
So what?
A little more science to that.
Yeah, assuming that you get to whatever altitude class that you're in, how do you win?
So the whole process is we start out in the beginning of October, and teams will submit their preliminary design, and that preliminary design is reviewed. We give points for making sure that things are delivered on time. So along the way, there's these little point gathering things that it's just the mechanics of this. So then to the critical design, then we do a video design review. When the scoring really starts to get going is when they submit their technical report. And the technical report it's a absolute, honest to God, publishable item, and that's the thing we're working with the AIAA on, is to have this become part of that student's academic record and be published. So that's one of the things we're working on, because it's that level of detail and engineering and quality. They get marked on their technical reports. During the event, you mentioned June 10th, is when we open up our convention center, and the students have already been through an on-site safety review, because it's our first chance to get our fingers on the rocket. They'll be there through their first safety review, and then they put up a poster session. This year we have 150 teams that are going to be at the convention itself, from all over the world, roughly 60-40, 60 US based, 40% non-US based, and that's the 20 countries and that sort of thing. Judges, we have judges from the industry, and we team up a technical person with a non-technical person. And so it's technically they're evaluated, they're judged on that, they're judged on presentation, they're judged, on functionality and that sort of thing. And they get, the real good ones, we put up for technical awards and innovation awards and that sort of thing, which is outside the competition. It's just part of their quality of work. And then it's on to the launch pad, So the 11th, 12th, 13th, and a little bit of the 14th, we're out. It's about 2.5 hours out of Midland, actually, because Midland's, a city. You've got to be in the middle of nowhere to launch this. And believe me, we're in the middle of nowhere this year. So to launch, and they'll get credit for being ready to launch, actually launching when we're committed to launch, and then how well they did. And it's altitude based in addition to all the other technical parameters, but the teams are getting very sophisticated. So a lot of our papers this year that will be presented at the conference are teams that are using electronics to monitor altitude and understanding what their velocity is at the time. And if they're gonna overshoot, they're gonna deploy, a lot of times it's a flap on the outside of the rocket that will create resistance to slow it down so that they'll hit their apogee when they say. And then we do a form of dual deploy recovery, which is at apogee, they'll deploy a drogue chute that slows the rocket down, and then at about 1,500 to 1,000 feet, they'll deploy their main chute with the goal of not having to chase the rocket so far. So the big chute opens up when it's closer to the ground so it doesn't drift so much. And then they go out and recover. And recovery is fun too. We have our Mission Control Center that hands out a backpack to every team. A team of 5 will go out to look for the rocket. The backpack contains all the waters and radio. They have to communicate back to our management system, and they also have a GPS tracker on them, so we know where they are when they're out in the field, and we track that. They bring their rocket back. We have a team that then evaluates how well the launch went,